distinguished delegates, honored guests, colleagues in the most consequential work of our generation, good morning. Before we discuss policy frameworks and financing mechanisms, before we examine treaty architectures and institutional coordination, I want to tell you about a conversation that haunts me still. Years ago, in a room not unlike this one in London, I sat across from two Russian gentlemen who held the keys to possibilities I could barely articulate. They showed me something, not through documents or presentations, but through a clarity that transcended conventional communication. They showed me Africa as it could be, not as it was, not as others insisted it must remain, but as it could become if we possessed the courage to architect our own ascent. They showed me the Ndege group before the Ndege group had a name. They showed me the symposium before I understood what symposiums were for. They showed me African history and institutional coordination before I could comprehend why fragmentation had persisted for so long. They said something I have carried with me ever since. Your memory is remarkable, and this will all come back to you when you need it most. I'm here because it has. I'm not here to speak of prophecy or mystical foresight. I'm here to speak of pattern recognition, the ability to see trajectories before they manifest, to identify inflection points while they remain malleable, to understand what appears inevitable is merely what we lack the imagination or will to prevent. That's what brought me here. That's what built the Ndege Group, which is Africa's Sovereign Development Trust. And that's what this symposium exists to catalyze. The world as we know it is dead. Let's begin with an honesty that cuts through the diplomatic pleasantry. The world we were raised to understand, the post-Cold War, Washington consensus, dollar-denominated, institution-dominated global order is dying. Not metaphorically, not eventually. It is dying now, in real time, while most still pretend otherwise. Consider a single data point that illuminates everything. In 2021, Jamie Dimon, chairman and CEO of JP Morgan Chase, declared Bitcoin worthless, likening cryptocurrency to fool's gold. By January 2023, he escalated his rhetoric, calling it hyped-up fraud and a pet rock, asserting he would close it down if the government helped him. Yet by May 2025, JP Morgan announced it would permit clients to purchase Bitcoin with plans to accept both Bitcoin and Ethereum as loan collateral by the year's end. In October 2025, at Saudi Arabia's mega investment summit, Mr. Dimon acknowledged, and I quote, "Crypto is real, blockchain is real, stablecoins are real. They will be used by all of us. This is not mere institutional capitulation. This is recognition that fundamental assumptions about value, exchange, and trust are being challenged by technologies that privilege transparency over opacity, verification over assertion. The institutions that profited from informational asymmetry now find themselves compelled to participate in systems designed to eliminate such advantages. The question is no longer whether these transformations occur. The question is whether Africa shapes them or is shaped by them. The de-dollarisation reality no one wishes to name. While Western institutions debate cryptocurrency's legitimacy, a far more consequential transformation unfolds: the systematic dismantling of dollar hegemony. The US dollar accounts for approximately 59% of global foreign exchange reserves as of 2024. This represents decline from 71% in 1999. The trajectory is clear. The implications are profound. The BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, expanded in January 2025 to include Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, with Indonesia achieving full membership as well. This represents over half of the world's population, 46% of global GDP on purchasing power, and substantial portions of global energy, mineral, and food production. While BRICS has not created a unified currency yet, particularly following President Trump's threats of 100 to 150% tariffs on nations pursuing de-dollarisation, they've achieved something more consequential: functional alternatives. China and Russia conduct majority of bilateral trade in yuan and rubles. Brazil and China execute yuan-real settlement agreements. India purchases Russian oil in rupees. Over 95% of Russian-Iran trade in 2024 occurred in rubles and reals, bypassing the dollar clearing systems entirely. The new development bank, established by BRICS in 2014, increasingly lends in local currencies, enabling member states to avoid dollar-denominated debt exposure. China's cross-border interbank payment system now connects 4,800 banks across 185 countries, providing yuan-based transaction infrastructure independent of SWIFT. And central banks worldwide? They accumulated 1,045 metric tons of gold in 2024, marking the end of the third consecutive year exceeding 1,000 metric tons of this acquisition type. Poland added 90 tons. China, Turkey, India, they all accumulated aggressively. This is not random accumulation. This is strategic hedging against dollar exposure by nations seeking monetary sovereignty. The question before us is not whether monetary multipolarity arrives. It's whether Africa positions itself as an architect of a new monetary arrangement or merely a consumer of others' currency designs. Africa's blockchain moment. From corruption victim to transparency pioneer. Africa has suffered disproportionately from precisely the opacity that traditional finance systems perpetuate. Corruption in public procurement alone consumes between 8 and 25% of tender values in some jurisdictions. The lack of transparency has not been an unfortunate accident. It's been structurally advantageous to certain actors both within and beyond the continent. Blockchain technology fundamentally threatens this arrangement. Guinea-Bissau, for example, launched in May 2024 a blockchain platform for public sector wage bill management supported by the International Monetary Fund. The system provides near real-time monitoring of salary and pension eligibility, budgeting, payment approvals, and disbursements on tamper-evident ledger. By November 2024, the platform had tracked all 26,600 public officials. The wage bill, which consumed 80% of tax revenues, declined to 50%, still above regional targets, but representing remarkable improvement, enabled solely by transparency. Ghana announced in May 2024 its intention to become the first African nation to adopt blockchain for all government procedures, designed to ensure all data and transactions in the government space are transparent and tamper-proof. South Africa's Gauteng provincial government embraced blockchain to refine procurement through its open tender process, ensuring supplier selection, transparency, and equity. These are not pilot programs. They are operational systems processing actual government transactions, creating immutable audit trails, eliminating opportunities for covert manipulation. The implications for development finance are transformative. Blockchain-based project financing with milestone-based payments creates verifiable proof of completion before funds disperse. This is not merely efficiency, it's a fundamental alteration of the risk calculus for global capital considering African investment. When development finance institutions can verify in real time that infrastructure promised is infrastructure delivered, the cost of capital declines. When procurement transparency is cryptographically enforced, sovereign risk premiums compress. When every dollar or euro tracked, every dollar or euro accounted for, patient capital becomes possible. This is the technological foundation upon which Africa's sovereign development must be built. The Ndege Group as the culmination and the catalyst. Against this backdrop of systemic transformation, the Ndege Group emerges not as an anomaly but as a logical culmination and necessary catalyst. Africa's Sovereign Development Trust represents 3 years of institutional research, analysis of failed continental integration attempts, and synthesis of what actually works when stripped of diplomatic rhetoric. The platform's proprietary OmniGaza system, the African Federation Treaty Framework, and the United African Defense Force initiatives address what has hindered African development most acutely. Not a lack of resources, but a lack of coordinated, transparent, and accountable systems for mobilizing these resources toward continental priorities established by Africans ourselves. The innovation is not merely technological, the innovation is architectural. OmniGaza creates blockchain-based infrastructure for development finance with milestone payment projection execution and transparent governance mechanisms. This speaks directly to global capital's legitimate concerns while refusing to compromise African sovereignty. The United African Defense Force, which you will hear presented in detail later today, converts continental security from fragmented national expenditure into coordinated continental asset. Not merely military capability, but economic infrastructure that protects the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement implementation, reduces sovereign risk and premiums, and signals to patient capital that Africa is serious about protecting the investments that we bite. And the African Rare Earth Mineral Fund represents the financing mechanism that makes everything else possible. Rather than waiting for donor grants or accepting conditionality-laden loans, we leverage Africa's collective mineral wealth, the cobalt, lithium, rare earths, and power global technology transition, to issue sovereign-backed instruments that capitalize our own development. This is in theory. The frameworks exist, the legal structures are established, the intellectual property is protected in my name. The only question is whether institutions gathered in this room and online possess the vision to participate in what comes next. The brutal arithmetic of extraction. Let me speak plainly about something this room must confront. Africa possesses 30% of the world's mineral reserves, 40% of gold, 60% of cobalt, 80% of platinum, the rare earth elements that power every smartphone, electric vehicle, and wind turbine and solar panel. Yet Africa receives on average less than 7% of the value generated by these resources. The remaining 93% accrues to those who extract, refine, manufacture, and distribute. It's not conspiracy, it's simple arithmetic of extraction economics when the extractor possesses more institutional capacity than the owner. The African Rare Earth Mineral Fund exists to alter this arithmetic. Rather than selling mineral rights for immediate cash, while others capture perpetual value, we're structuring sovereign-backed instruments that retain equity in the entire value chain. Rather than exporting raw material for others to refine and manufacture, we build refining and manufacturing capacity capitalized by the very resources we're developing. Rather than accepting that Africa must remain a provider of raw inputs while others capture value-added production, we use blockchain transparency and institutional coordination to ensure that every ton of cobalt extracted, every ounce of lithium processed, generates returns that fund African schools, African hospitals, and African infrastructure. It's not protectionism, it's strategic asset deployment. It's not resource nationalism, it's value retention. This is not anti-trade, this is insistence that trade be structured equitably. And it requires something this continent has historically lacked: institutional coordination backed by credible enforcement capacity, which is precisely what the African Federation Treaty Framework and the United African Defense Force provide. I must speak personally for a moment because the work we do is never merely professional. I'm 32. I was born in 1993. I don't have a personal memory of apartheid's formal structures, though I live daily with its persistent echoes. I came of age during the Africa Rising narrative, when global institutions discovered, to their apparent surprise, that the continent held investment potential. I watched that narrative collapse during Ebola, during commodity price crashes, during every crisis that revealed how fragile external interest in Africa prosperity is. I watched leaders I admired compromise principles I thought were sacred. I watched institutions I respected prioritize self-preservation over service. I watched brilliant minds emigrate because opportunity abroad exceeded possibility at home. And I made a decision, not a comfortable decision, not a popular decision, but a necessary one. I decided I would build the institutions that I wished existed, rather than lament their absence. I decided I would create the frameworks I needed rather than wait for others to grant permission. I decided I would risk appearing foolish, appearing arrogant, appearing naive, because the alternative, accepting that Africa's potential must remain forever potential, is unacceptable. The Ndege Group exists because I refuse to accept that brilliance born on this continent must seek validation elsewhere, that capital generated here must be managed abroad, that security protecting our resources must be provided by external powers, that development finance for infrastructure must flow through institutions that answer to governments far from our realities. I inherited neither wealth nor nepotism's connections personally. What I inherited, though, was an authentic spirit, vision, and a memory that's deep, a deep ancestral memory of what we were before conquest, what we remained despite subjugation, and what we can become once we reclaim our agency. In journeying into myself and discovering my purpose, I founded the Ndege Group because the curiosity, experience, and disposition of my heart insisted that I build something, and so I'm building. Distinguished delegates, we gather at a moment of profound consequence. The global systems being rewritten will either include African agency or render us subjects of others' designs. The monetary multipolarity emerging will either position Africa as monetary sovereign or perpetual currency consumer. The technology transformations accelerating will either place Africa as innovation creator or permanent technology importer. These outcomes are not predetermined, though. They're contingent on choices made now in rooms like these by people like us. The African Federation Treaty Framework offers specific architecture for continental coordination that preserves national sovereignty while enabling collective action. It's not perfect and it's not final. It's malleable architecture requiring institutional input, critique, and refinement. And that's why you're here or watching. Not to applaud, not to endorse without examination, but to engage seriously with the difficult questions of how we transition from fragmented aspiration to coordinated capability. How do we finance continental infrastructure without surrendering sovereignty? The ASDT model provides one answer: asset-backed instruments leveraging mineral wealth, but requires institutional participation to become operational. How do we protect the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement implementation when national defense structures cannot coordinate their own borders? The UADF framework provides one answer: phased integration building on existing regional cooperation, but that requires defense ministries' engagement to become real. How do we ensure development finance reaches intended destinations without leakage? OmniGaza blockchain infrastructure provides one answer: transparent, milestone-based disbursement with cryptographic verification. But that requires development finance institution and sovereign wealth fund adoption to scale. These are not rhetorical questions. They're operational challenges with proposed solutions requiring institutional validation, refinement, and implementation support. Your presence here or online signals willingness to engage. The question is whether engagement translates to action or merely becomes another conference where we're discussing what we might do while doing nothing. So here's what we're actually asking. Allow me to be specific about what this symposium requests. We're not asking for immediate financial commitments. We're not demanding instant ratification, because we understand institutional change requires deliberation, consultation, and careful consideration. I ask for 4 things: serious engagement with the African Federation Treaty Framework, that you read and engage with the documents we distribute, consult your legal teams, identify concerns, propose amendments, but engage with the substance, not merely the concept. I also ask for designation of institutional liaisons who will continue dialogue beyond the symposium. Development finance cannot occur through annual conferences. It requires ongoing coordination, technical working groups, and sustained institutional commitment. Thirdly, your willingness to support and participate in the pilot programs of the UADF framework through its phased implementation processes. Phase 1 requires pilot participants willing to test integration protocols, joint procurement mechanisms, and coordinated rapid response frameworks. Without pilot participation, we remain theoretical. Lastly, I ask for honest assessment of institutional constraints. If your ministry, your bank, your family office, your organization cannot participate, tell us why. Constraints illuminate where frameworks require adjustment. Silence helps no one. It's not a request for endorsement, but an invitation to co-architect. We have built frameworks. You possess the implementation expertise, institutional relationships, and operational experience that we lack. Together, we can create what neither can achieve alone. There exists in every great transformation a moment before the moment, when outcome remains uncertain, when trajectory can still shift, when decisions made by individuals in rooms determine fates of millions who will never know their names. And this is that moment. What we build here, or fail to build, will determine whether Africa enters the next era as an architect or as a subject, whether our children inherit sovereignty or perpetual dependency, whether the minerals beneath our feet fund our schools or foreign hedge funds. I'm not naive enough to believe one symposium or one video will change everything, but I'm experienced enough to know that every transformation begins with efforts like these, with people like us making choices that seem small until history reveals their consequence. The gentleman who showed me this future years ago, they understood something I've come to comprehend. That the future is not fixed, that what appears inevitable is merely what we lack the courage to alter. That the difference between destiny and delusion is the willingness to do the unglamorous work of institutional architecture while others pursue symbolic gestures. So I built the Ndege group. I created the African Federation Treaty Framework. I assembled the team presenting today. I invited you here not because I need the applause, but because I need partners. I need your expertise, your networks, your institutional authority, your willingness to risk association with something that might fail. Because the alternative, accepting that Africa's trajectory is fixed, is intolerable. Over the next few days, you will hear presentations on OmniGaza, blockchain infrastructure, the United African Defense Force integration, sovereign financing mechanisms, and the Continental coordination frameworks. You'll receive documentation that's dense, technical, and challenging, and that's intentional. I'm not seeking enthusiasm, but we are seeking institutional commitment based on rigorous analysis. You will have opportunities for bilateral consultations, working group discussions, and informal dialogue over the next year. Use them. The margins of conferences often prove more productive than formal sessions. And when you return to your offices, your ministries, your boardrooms, you will face a choice. You can file the documentation as interesting but premature. You can praise the vision while deferring the work. You can applaud the ambition while avoiding the commitment. Or you can become co-architects of what comes next. The Ndege group will continue building whether you join or not. The frameworks will be refined, the systems will be implemented, the partnerships will be formed. The only question is whether your institution will be part of what we build or merely studies it afterwards. I'm not here to persuade you, I'm here to present architecture and invite participation. The persuasion must come from the work itself, from the rigor of the frameworks, the viability of the financing models, and the practical nature of the implementation pathways. If what we present fails that test, then we require a critique to improve it. If it passes that test, then we require your participation to scale it. Either way, engagement matters. That vision shown to someone who lacked language to describe it. That insistence that my memory would preserve what I could not yet comprehend. It has. And now I'm here, no longer alone in a room, with foreign affairs experts who saw possibilities but surrounded by institutions who possess the power to make the possibilities real. The memory I carry is not mine alone, it's ancestral and it's collective. It's the memory of what Africa was before conquest, and what has remained through subjugation, and what we can be when we reclaim agency. That memory insists that we are more than resource suppliers for others' prosperity. That memory insists that we are more than recipients of others' development models. That memory insists that we are architects and not subjects. The Ndege group exists because that memory has refused to stay buried in me. The symposium exists because the memory demands manifestation. The frameworks we present exist because that memory requires institutional form. And you are here watching because that memory recognizes you as co-architects of what comes next. The status quo is dead. The question is what we build in its place. So let's begin. Thank you.